Hey everyone, this is George Karabasis taking classes in Bridge Gap Academy. In today's video, we're going to talk about why JavaScript is useful. Why do we need JavaScript anyways in order to create our websites? Can't we just build websites with HTML, CSS, and PHP? So in today's video, we're going to show you many examples of why JavaScript is used and how JavaScript can make your website look a lot better, more interactive, and more dynamic. Now let's start with some motivation at the beginning. So as you can see, JavaScript and Python are among the first choices of programming languages to learn right now in 2022. So JavaScript has been growing rapidly over the last couple of years, and this can be seen with all the many frameworks that JavaScript is using. For example, I'm sure you have heard of React or jQuery. They're among the most popular JavaScript frameworks, which can help you to create a website faster, to add effects a lot easier, more animations, and of course many more functionalities, which by using plain or vanilla JavaScript will be extremely difficult to do. Here are some of the most popular frameworks that you can use with JavaScript. Of course, one of the most important is going to be React. Now React allows you to bring HTML, CSS, and JavaScript together and split up the website into components. So for example, the navbar is going to be a component, image is going to be a component, a small box on the website is going to be a component, a button is going to be a component, the footer is going to be a component, the content is going to be a component, and so on. It simply makes the website a lot easier to organize on the front end. We like to write one piece of code for one component and then do all the necessary changes within that component. And React is a perfect tool for you to do that. We also have Angular, which is still very popular, but React is taking the lead. We also have Vue.js, another front-end JavaScript framework. We have jQuery, which has been very popular in the last decade, but right now is diminishing a little bit because it's simply too big. We also have Preact, and if you're into mobile apps, then you can still use JavaScript. You can still use JavaScript in order to build a mobile application for iOS and Android. So the way it works is that you're going to write the code with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or you can use React Native, and then you just convert the code on for iOS and Android. That's it. So you don't have to use Swift and Java in order to build the application into separate platforms. With JavaScript and using React Native, it's going to convert the entire thing into both iOS and Android. So you see how powerful JavaScript is and how you can use it in many different applications. Lately, you can even use it for machine learning, building games, even 3D games too, all the way to creating mobile apps for Android and iOS. And with all those frameworks, it's now easier than ever to create a single and complex web app on your own and still be able to maintain it afterwards. Now let's go ahead and look at some examples and details on some of the websites I have built, which I happen to use a lot of JavaScript in order to make the websites more interactive, more dynamic. Now, the number one website I want us to look at is ncovtrack.com. Now, ncovtrack.com has been built entirely on JavaScript. And now you're probably going to ask me, what do you use for the backend? And the answer is JavaScript. I use Node.js, which is a backend framework which uses JavaScript. So this is another cool thing that JavaScript allows us to do. If you know JavaScript, then you can go ahead and build an entire website, both backend and frontend, with using only JavaScript. You don't need to learn a separate language for the backend, such as PHP or Python or Java or Django for Python or Laravel for PHP. Everything can be done with JavaScript. And this is very cool because you don't have to learn a different language. So now let's go ahead and refresh the whole website and see how the website loads. So as you can see, all this data are not being fetched as soon as the website refreshes. They're going to be fetched after a couple of seconds. Why? Well, if we were to fetch the entire information at once without having to wait until this information loads, then the website is going to take much longer in order to show color on the browser, which is something that we don't want, because if me as a visitor don't see any color within 3 seconds, I'm going to have to leave. I'm going to have to leave the website and then visit another website, which hopefully is going to be faster. So if I refresh again, and then you can also see this effect down here on the table. notice that the data is going to load after a couple of seconds. Now, why this is cool? Because if I refresh, notice that the website will paint immediately, and then it's going to be interactive because by having some feature saying, for example, loading data, it's going to make me confident that the data is going to load very soon. So that's going to allow me to stay on the website and wait a little bit in order to see the data. Now, this is also very useful, especially in countries where the bandwidth is very low. So the website doesn't have to load all the data at once and hence take a lot more time to load the entire website. Loading the website chunk by chunk, bit by bit, data by data, is going to always be much better than loading everything at once. Also, this website has some multiple functionalities which use only JavaScript. So for example, what if I wanted to create a functionality which is going to make the website dark mode? So for example, I can click on this toggle here. Notice that without refreshing, change the entire website into dark mode. And if I press again here, it's going to change the entire website into light mode. So this is something you cannot do with PHP or with a backend unless you tell the website to refresh by passing a parameter saying dark mode, and then it's going to change the entire website into dark mode. But this is not very efficient. Why do you want to load the entire website, all the data, just only to change the entire website into dark mode? It's simply not efficient and it's going to drive a lot of people away. So by using JavaScript, we're going to do all of this without having to refresh the entire website. You can also see a similar effect by changing from statistics to graphs to the news. And of course, I can also change the cases from to recovers. You can see that all of this is done with JavaScript. Again, we don't want to reload the entire website. We only want to change that part. And that's another reason why we want to use JavaScript. If JavaScript didn't exist, then we'll have to load the entire website from the beginning with all the data, and that's going to take a lot more time. We can even scroll all the way down and we can change the graphs here as well. We can add more countries and see more information. We can also change to vaccines, for example, and you see a similar effect that we did above. Again, the entire website is not being loaded. It's just those two graphs that need to be loaded. Now, this is the most detailed vaccine and COVID tracker website I have built, and JavaScript has helped me a lot in order to make sure that this website is interactive, is dynamic, and it displays information fast and efficiently. Now let's look at another example. Let's have a look at a blog type of a website. Now this is a website that I maintain, which I am uploading tech advice and tech guidance on various topics. So look at what happens if I refresh the website and I scroll down. Notice that this information doesn't load immediately compared to this information which is there, okay? So this information has been loaded asynchronously, again for the same reason, in order to avoid having to load so many data at once and cause the bandwidth to fill up. So let's try this again. Notice that the top part stays there because it's something that we absolutely want to load, because what happens if JavaScript doesn't work? The top part needs to stay there. We want to have something to stay there regardless of whether JavaScript works or not, to have some information. Okay. Now let's go ahead and click on one article and see how JavaScript can be used there. Notice that the article loads immediately, and then notice that this part is going to load after a few seconds, because it's something that we don't want to see immediately. It's something that we don't want to see immediately. This is not what the visitor is going to see first. The visitor is going to see the article. It's click on the article in order to read what the article is about. So here we don't really need JavaScript in order to load it later on in order to make the website faster. We want to load it immediately and then load all the other things on the background. So while the visitor is reading the article, that's going to load. And if we scroll all the way down, notice that the images are going to be loaded asynchronously as well. So this is going to be another technique in order to make the website load faster. We don't want to load all the images at the same time as soon as the article is loaded. We want the images to load as soon as they appear on the screen. So if I scroll fast, notice the images are loading. And if I scroll down, the comment section is also something that's going to load asynchronously. So I can change the display from Change it to 5. It's going to show me the top 5 comments. I can also show, I can also load more replies. So this is going to go back to the database, fetch those two replies, and then it's going to display them here. Another reason why you want to use JavaScript, because you don't want to load data which may not be useful for the visitor. The visitor may not even want to look into the comments at all. And even if they look into the comments, they may not want to look at all the comments, and also they don't want to look at all of the replies. So if that's the case, then you can load them asynchronously. So as soon as the comments appear on the screen, to load asynchronously, or just load it on the background while the user is reading on the blog. So again, in this kind of websites, we're doing whatever is possible in order to avoid loading a lot of data on the website and hence slowing it down in the meantime. So we want to make sure that we load the website as soon as possible at the beginning. Now let's have a look at one final example where you can use JavaScript in order to do some cool effects on your website. Make the website more organic and make the website look cooler. So that happens to be my personal website, and you're probably going to ask me, how do I do this network on the background? Now this network is done purely by JavaScript. So I've written some code which is going to draw all these elements, and it's going to do this cool effect here with the networks. Now this is done by using the canvas element. So we can right click, go to inspect element, and then notice that we have a canvas element taking the entire website from left to right. Now I use this and then I draw the animation on the canvas. This is again not possible if you don't use JavaScript. The best bet is going to be to use a video or a GIF, but it's not going to be the same. Now notice on the navbar what happens if I scroll down. If I scroll down and scroll up, notice how the navbar fades in. If I scroll down below the hero, notice that the navbar fades in and slowly appears to the user. Now looking at the frameworks that we spoke about earlier, for my personal website, I'm using jQuery. Because jQuery is very easy to use in order to create animations instead of writing them with vanilla JavaScript. Now if I scroll all the way down, notice how the portfolio slowly appears, fades in with animation. Notice how this part fades in as well, how this part appears as well, slowly with animation, and then how the rest of the website on the footer also shows up. Now all this you cannot do with HTML, CSS, but only with JavaScript, because you need to tell JavaScript, hey, if the element appears on the screen, or the user has scrolled to the point where the element can be visible, display it with a fade in effect. Now look at what happens if I refresh the website. So notice that there's a small animation which is going to show up while the website is loading. Now the way this works is that you tell JavaScript, if the website is loading, then show this animation, the loader screen. As soon as it's loaded, make the animation to disappear. Also, a final example, notice how the languages change. So I have multiple languages here, Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, you name it. And notice how they randomly change. So they're going to change from Arabic, for example, then they're going to go to another language, maybe Russian or you name it. And this is going to be randomly generated. So randomly it's going to pick a language and then show it in the screen. Now, I hope this gave you an initial motivation of why you want to start learning JavaScript. JavaScript is very powerful and is very exciting along the way. There's a lot of things to learn and a lot of paths to choose, from full stack development, front end, back end, all the way to mobile development, and even game development in some occasions. So in the next video tutorial, we're going to go through the basics of JavaScript and how to use it in order to make your website more interactive and dynamic. My name is George Karabasis, and I'm going to see you in the next video.